Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Florida Hockey Bros. We're a podcast where two Cuban brothers break down the deeper layers of all things NHL, and we might embarrass each other while we're doing it. We do a good job of that. But today we're going to be discussing the Jeremy Swayman situation. Don Sweeney's playing with fire there a little bit by not having the extension done yet, and also how the Bruins going to end up overpaying. And is Swayman even worth the top dollar that he seems to be asking for? Um, then, for all the Maple Leaf fans out there, we're going to be sharing our thoughts on the Mitch Marner and Tavares extensions that might be coming up soon. And at least one of us thinks it'd be a huge mistake. So stay tuned for that. And then finally, we're going to dig into the New Jersey Devils and all the hype around them. That's another team that's sort of fascinating us lately. And we're wondering if they're really a top, cup contender. Are they even going to win the Metro with the Rangers and the Canes there? And do the Hughes brothers play any defense? Do they need to play any defense? That's a good question. And we have very strong thoughts about that, especially when it comes to Jack Hughes. So we'll start with the Jeremy Swayman situation. It's sort of developing in the last couple of days. There's been word out there that he's demanding top dollar, around $10 million a year. Not sure who leaked that or how it got out there, or maybe it was just someone's opinion, but it's out there. And it's just curious that they haven't extended him yet, considering they already dealt Olmark, who was also going to ask for a good amount of money, I'm sure, in the future. So let's start there. What do you make of all that? It's kind of interesting that they traded Olmark so early, no?
Well, I think they had to because I think it was going to be harder to keep Swayman if Olmark was still there. In a way, I think it would have sent a signal that they're not ready to commit. And at some point, both goalies are going to want to be starters given their numbers and their opportunity to make money. So I think they knew. I mean, some people thought that maybe even last year they would have been split. So I thought they were going to split them up last year. So I totally get that they had to move on. I do think that was a smarter thing to do for the team long term and for the goalies long term. I don't know that both guys, I mean, they make it seem like they're super cool together, but Swayman, I'm sure, was asking for more playing time, and Olmark wants to have his own team because he was being pushed out. So I'm not surprised that trade happened. To me, it's also not surprising now that Swayman has the leverage and probably waited to be a starter before he did the contract to then maybe ask for a lot of money. And who knows who leaked the $10 million number, but it makes sense. I was looking at the numbers and stuff, and so that people are aware. I mean, Swayman has played in 20, has started in 20 playoff games. Like Markstrom, who's a vet, super old, has only started, I think, in 26 in his career. Saros has only started in 33, who's already 29 years old. So Swayman's already in the playoffs. In some ways, has proven as some of these guys. His numbers in the playoffs are way better than those guys you just mentioned. They're better than Hellebuck's. And in the regular season, his numbers are better than a lot of these other guys, right? A lot of Hellebuck got 8.5 and Saros got 7.75 or whatever it was. He's putting up better numbers than these guys already. And I know the sample is smaller in the regular season, but Swayman can make an argument that his numbers are pretty elite because they are. So he's looking ahead. He's only 25, turning 26. And he's saying, if you get me for my prime for the next 8 years, 7 years or whatever it is, like, I want top dollar. And that's what's going to be. I mean, you already have, Bobrovsky making 10 million, Shesterkin's supposed to going to ask for over 10, people saying 11, 12. So yeah, I'm not surprised that if that's true, that's what he's asking. Now, the question is, if you're the Bruins, do you give that to him, right? Because that is a lot of money. Now, City just proved you can win with a $10 million goalie, but a lot of things have to go right. And I don't know that you recommend that as a way to build a team. But you could also look at it as, you have a defenseman, you have a forward, and now a goalie as your core going forward with Pasternak and McAvoy and him. So maybe what you try to do if you're the Bruins is just try to bring that number down, maybe to like 9.25. Can you find other incentives, and can you keep that number under 10 to try to set you up well long term, because the cap is going to go up. Because I think if you do the 10 million, you are committing to him in a way where like this is your starter no matter what. You're not gonna be able to move him at that price if he all of a sudden has a drop off, which probably won't. But he does have a really strong defensive core in front of him. So yeah, I think what you have right now is sort of a battle of wills here, where like the team is trying to bring that number probably as down as they can, without disrespecting the player. And I think Sweeney's known for being a hard ass and sometimes doesn't want to give out big contracts. Pasternak took him deep into the season, different situation and all that, but that just speaks to them not being afraid to wait and like kind of like Cito does, like really battle it out. But in this case, it's pretty risky because if he doesn't want to start the season, you're stuck with Korpisalo. So anyway, to me, it's just going to come down to like, is Swayman want to do anything for the team and take a discount? Which why would he? This is the first big contract, probably his last big long-term contract. He's got to maximize his money, and the Bruins want to try to stay a contender. So it'll be curious to see, but. I don't know. If I had to predict, I'm saying that they're going to land somewhere like 9.5. Probably they're going to find a compromise where Swayman still gets a lot of money, and the team looks, with that $10 out there. If they sign him for under that, the fans will be happy, and that's probably what will happen.
Yeah, and I guess as if you're Sweeney, you have to look at a few things before you make that decision. You have to start with what's your window. Is there even a window for you to win another cup here? Is that sooner rather than later? So you sort of have to be realistic when you look at that picture and where Swayman fits in all of that, especially with that salary. And then for it makes all the sense in the world for Swayman to ask for 10. I probably would do it too. But does it really make sense for the Bruins? Like you said, he would basically have to be part of your core 4 players, which is usually how we define these teams nowadays. We kind of look at the core 4, something a trend that the Leafs kind of started. And when you look at every team, there's a couple teams out there that you have to include the goalie in that core 4. Hellebuck would be an example of that. So it's just a matter of how the Bruins want to proceed, man. I mean, they already play a defensive style with a good goaltender like him. I think they can definitely go far. I don't know if they'll be able to win a cup the way the team is currently constructed. They need a little bit more offense. They need something, a little bit of a spark in some of these games where they struggle to score. And that you can get through the season with just pure defense and goaltending. But beyond the numbers, I think Swayman is a really good goaltender. He's very young. He is worth the money. I just don't know how you go about this. And also, what's his mentality here? Does he want to win? It's taking $500K less per season, not worth, the sacrifice for you to add a little bit more on the forward group. So that's all those questions need to be answered. And I think there will be. I think they'll get it done, but that's where I would look at it.
Yeah, and Swayman's going to ask for the money. I mean, at the end of the day, again, this is his one big contract, and I don't hate on the player for asking for that, especially if you say, well, the cap's going to go up. So in 3 years, when I'm still in my prime, in my 20s.
Yeah, it's not Bobrovsky's $10 million, right?
Yeah, exactly. Bob is already 36, so I think, yeah, you're saying like you're still going to have me in my prime when that $10 million isn't going to feel like $10 million. So that's his argument. And yeah, he wants to win and all that, but he feels he does a lot for the team. His numbers are pretty elite. And right now he's projecting to be a really top goalie. So yeah, I can see it from his point of view. I think fans are saying, oh, sign him. I mean, I also don't hate that Sweeney's trying to do his part. I'm sure they're trying to go over different ways to cut, to save money, to work around the cap. And, he's doing his job as a GM. I think, you just don't want to lose him. I mean, I think something will get done. There's no way. I mean, at worst, you pay for this guy and you keep him because he's worth it. The youth, it's hard to find a great goalie, and you're not paying him like he's not going to be the highest paid goalie in the league anyway. So I think something will get done. It's just a matter of like, what are they really battling over? Is it no trade clauses? Is it bonuses? Is it the AAV? Those are the things that will have to get figured out. But you got to sign them, man. Forget the window. I mean, right now they have a decent team that could win, but they're lacking some speed, lacking some offensive skill. They're a little bit too similar. They're like a high-end version of the Islanders a bit. to be honest, with Pasternak as sort of the standout. Um, so to me, I think maybe it's just a matter of a roster. And I think Swayman shouldn't give up money. Pasternak to 11 point whatever 6 mil. He took a lot of money. You could argue he could get paid more, whatever, but that's still a lot of money. So yeah, I think something will get done. I think the team will be fine. I think he's worth it. I think they'll be okay. So, my perspective is this is just what a smart GM, patient GM is trying to do to do what's best for the team. And then the player trying to say, well, I want to give him money. Hopefully everything gets worked out and they'll be fine. I just don't see him walking, and I don't see him Sweeney not signing him. But I also don't think he should just say, like, yeah, just give him all the money. Because
Yeah. No, he's not walking. If he was going to walk, there would have been an offer sheet somewhere or something.
Offer sheets are not so simple. People talk about offer sheets because that's happened. You know how many first round picks you have to give up for Swayman?
Yeah, that's the issue.
Like people don't, people don't realize that they're capped. Like, who has $10 million to throw around?
That's the other thing, right?
Most good teams don't have $10 million. Most good teams don't have 3-round picks, like, first round picks or whatever. So, like, people say that. I think at the end of the day, what's obvious here is that the GM is also sending a message, which is like, I'm not a pushover, right? Like, I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to be tough. And then the player saying, pay me. They'll figure it out. They'll land on something. I'm sure both sides know what the real number is and the real final version of the contract is. And they'll probably get it done before the end of camp. I'd be very surprised if Sweeney holds the line. They must be asking for the moon if he really holds the line, because then the fans are going to get pissed. But yeah, I think they'll be fine. Just hopefully they don't. It doesn't feel like an overpay in the end. If you can keep it just under 9, just under 10, I would say long term probably a good deal for the Bruins anyway.
Yeah, and I think Vasilevsky's making a lot, right? Vasilevsky's making 9.5. Swayman is also 25 years old. So if you give him 7-8 years, that's not bad at all. At age 33, 34, that's when the contract ends. That's actually ideal. So I think it's the right thing to do. I don't know if he's looking for 10 million a year because maybe the term is 7 years. That could be a reason. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they gotta do it. I think you sort of learn that when you have certain players in your roster, you have to extend them or re-sign them or whatever the case may be, which is kind of what bites the Maple Leafs in the ass so much, which is a great transition into our second topic. Let's talk about, it's been kind of quiet on the Tavares Marner front. Obviously, I think it's obvious that they're not getting traded. And I do think both guys will get extended. Is it a bad idea? Probably, especially the Tavares extension doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Depends what he's asking for. And Marner, yeah, you have to pay a guy like that, but how much? Is Marner really worth 12.5? Is he worth Draisaitl money? During the season, yes. I don't know if he gives you a full package when it comes to his value. So, where do you want to start there? You want to start on Tavares or Marner?
No, I think for me, it's just a question of the fact that if they extend both, which is probably where this is headed, it is just, first of all, hilarious, right? Like, if you stand back, it's hilarious. And that's probably what's going to happen. This whole Tavares captain thing, I think it's, they already planted the seed for an extension in the 4 to 5 million a year range, which is actually lower than I would have expected. But even if they're able to do that, I guess the two points I would say is that Marner's not worth more than $11 million a year. I just don't think he is, even in the regular season. When you look at some of the other guys out there, some of the other players who actually lead their teams, Pasternak doesn't just score a bunch of points. Like, he actually helps get his team over the hump. He elevates the team and makes them better than they are offensively. And you can say that for a lot of these other players in my mind, like Kucherov and some of these, McKinnon and all these other guys. These guys drive their team in many ways. I don't think Marner has ever been really a driver. He might do it for stretches for a week or two in the regular season. He gets hot. But it's Matthews, even Nylander has kind of taken that mantle because of his swag and blah, 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 and all that stuff. So I think he's going to want more than Nylander. And I think between the fact that, I don't know that he's a full driver, he doesn't even play center, and that he's not a playoff performer, I think you're overpaying. And again, if you were on a bad team and you're paying him as your like start forward, then I get it. But in a team like the Leafs that wants to compete, that has all these overpaid guys or a lot of money, it just doesn't make any sense. But that's what they're going to do, right? And so they're going to me, it's just with Marner, my only question is, are they going to make the same mistake that they did with Nylander, which is let him start the season, get hot, and then end up overpaying, which at the time will justify that the fans will be okay with giving him a contract? Or
Yeah, let Nylander have a couple of down years.
Right, exactly. Like people forget that Nylander before this year was sort of like an 80-point guy at most, and even Matthews, like he's not a 69 goal scorer all the time, and people are already saying, "Oh, Nylander, you should expect 50 goals now." And I'm like, what I would want Nylander if I were a fan is to play some damn defense so we can actually win a cup, right? But it's like fans just want the goals or whatever. It's like, what do you want? Do you want one or the other? You want a bunch of goals and fun, or do you want to win? And so with Marner, it's the same question. What is he going to provide to you? And if you're paying him and you extend him for 8 years or over 11.5, that's a huge commitment for him and Matthews. And Matthews is only around for the next 4 years or whatever. So to me, I think the Marner question is, how much are they ultimately going to, what's the AAV going to be? And how are they going to justify it based on how he does in the season? The Tavares one is the one that's tricky because Tavares is not so much the AAV, even if he does take the 4 or 5 million. It's a big pay cut. Is that if you give him a 4-year extension, I mentioned this before, but I was looking at it today and I just realized, man, in 2 years' time, and I'm talking about after this season and next, right? The first 2 years of Matthews' extension. For the last 2 years of Matthews' extension, you have a 37-year-old Tanev, 35-year-old OEL, 33-year-old McCabe, 32-year-old O'Reilly, 36-year-old Tavares, 31, I want to say, year-old Domi, 30-year-old McMahon. Your team is going to be the Oilers now, right? In terms of age, it's going to be really all real fast. And then obviously Matthews and Marner are going to be in the late, going to be 29. So you can still win with some of that, but Tavares at 36, $4 or $5 million a year with how slow he's gotten, are you going to live with the last 2 years? And the other thing I'll say about the extension is everybody says, "Oh, Tanev, you can hide the last couple of years of the Smiths, and you as though hiding 4.5 or million dollars is easy." But like LTR, this LTR, you can LTR everybody. What are you going to do with OEL? What are you going to do with Domi? What are you going to do with if Domi has a down year? We're going to do with Tavares. We're going to do with Tanev. Like, you can't just hide all that money. You're going to be no players left. And so you're going to be a really old team in 2 years. So you're basically sending the signal that you need to win now in the next year or two. Otherwise, you're going to start to get old, and it's going to be hard with some of that money locked up to be able to really go in free agency and add. And Nice is going to want to get paid. I know some of your younger guys, once their ELCs are over in 2 to 3 years, they're going to want their money. So yeah, man, I think that to me the danger here is that not just not moving on from the core four, which again, it's just like the comedy of it. It's what's funny. You're going to invest in over a decade for those 4 guys, even though they can win. But it's that extending Tavares in addition to all the other extensions you have. I don't think people have done the math because we live in the moment that in 2 years' time, which is not that long, it's 2 more seasons, and you still have Matthews at least for 2 years more. You're going to literally be really, really old as a team in terms of your core, and you're not going to have a lot of money. So you really have to hope that Cowan and Nice and all these guys take off as youth. But again, in 2 to 3 years, those guys are going to want to get paid. So, and moving some of these older contracts you're going to have to give up some stuff in order to move those contracts. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Tavares thing. I just don't think it's smart. I would let him walk. I would trade him. I know that you can't really trade him. I guess I would talk to him and say, but at this point, I think those conversations have already happened, man. I think the extensions have already been agreed on with Tavares. I think that conversation has already happened based on the reports, and they're just kind of waiting to finalize some stuff and announce it at some point. And I do think an extension for Marner is coming. They're just going to give it the season so that Marner can acclimate with the new system and look good, and then recapture the magic. And then when everybody's happy, maybe this year's different, the coach, blah, blah, look at Marner, then you overpay for him. But I think that's just where you're headed. I don't see a trade. I don't see a trade happening.
Yeah, I think with Marner, they're going to keep him. He's a Toronto guy. The fans like him there as much as they want to say that they're criticizing him. Yeah, it's just the team is built in a funny way, and it's clearly an experiment that should have ended, starting with the coach and then trickling down, and it just hasn't. And I think more than the salary cap implications with Tavares, what you're saying to your point is you're gonna have a guy that you already know what he brings to the table. You have to stop looking at these guys just as contributing in the playoffs with points or assists or goals. You have to stop doing that because you can get that from other guys that also give you really good two-way play, that can also penalty kill, that can also be on the power play. Nylander's not on the power play, not on the first unit. So you can't pay a guy that much when they cannot contribute everywhere on the ice. It limits your team, it limits your style to a certain degree, right? If you're Berube, you have Marner and Nylander, what are you going to do with those two guys? You can't ask them to back check and be physical on the back end. You can't ask them to not cheat. I mean, he'll ask them, but how is that going to look? Is Nylander going to really spend all that energy skating out there trying to defend so he can't score and get his cookies or his points? Is Marner going to do the same? That's the big question for that franchise, for the Leafs, and that's why it's so fascinating. So I think the Tavares thing would be a huge mistake, but that's something that they needed to do in order to get that seat to Matthews so they could sell more jerseys. And the Marner extension, the only thing I'm curious about is just the dollar amount. I know he's going to want more than Nylander, and he should get more than Nylander. If you're going to pay Nylander that much, then you have to give him 12 mil. But that's just crazy overpay for what you're getting back. At the end of the day, you have to build towards winning a cup. Otherwise, then what are you building towards? Just to make the playoffs? It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah, and they do overvalue the scoring. I think, um, in some ways it's kind of funny how that's so much of the emphasis. Marner putting up 85 points in 69 games or whatever it was this past season, and when you look at some of the other top teams, you don't necessarily have a bunch of high scoring guys to that level at the same rate, and yet they tend to go deeper. They win. So I just think it's just afraid of. To me, the big question, and this will have to be studied in retrospect when it ends, and there's a different sort of front office, and people can actually speak honestly about this. But what was the reasoning for all these guys to holding on to these players? This idea of winning, of waiting. You can wait because Iserman. So sorry, with Shanahan show with Iserman again had like 4 or 5 Hall of Famers around him by the time he won, right? And he'd been to the playoffs a bunch of times and got into second rounds and stuff. But he was surrounded by sort of the salary cap allowed for that team to really get loaded up. And that's going to be harder and harder to do for the Leafs. And the other thing is, Eisenman was surrounded by guys that can help him win. But right now, you have Nylander and Matthews and Marner and Tavares, all of whom haven't been able to win together. So who else are you going to add there to be able to, with their money, right, with the salaries to help them? So it's not the same situation, not the same salary cap, not the same structure. So I am very fascinated to know, like, why keep this, guys? Is it just the money? You're going to tell me you're not going to sell tickets if you trade Marner? You're going to tell me that just because you might drop a little bit in the standings? And we talked about it. They haven't even won a division in a while. So you might actually win one if you have more depth, more balance. So it is just interesting to me how they're committed to these guys. Like, they consider them stars. I know they're making money. And so, they just seem afraid to move on from this generation. And we're not saying everybody, but like at least one of them that should have been traded a while ago. And then going into the season, losing and losing and losing. Like, man, can you try to move one of them? Can you try to do something? But anyway, it's just the way that their run is. It's fascinating, and all you can do is hope. And if you extend Tavares, I'm telling you, you're going to get so fast. It's going to be really, really interesting and funny to see that happen in just a couple of years. And then you're stuck. And then you're stuck giving Marner and Nylander and Matthews a bunch of money. So yeah, man, I would have moved on from Tavares, but it seems like that isn't going to happen. And Marner is not going to get traded. That was always smoke and mirrors. Never conversation never came up. So we'll see what happens with the Leafs this season. But Leaf fans should just get I guess, used to the idea that this is it. The core is going to be there until all these guys are really old. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super obvious. It's all money. It's literally 99.9% money up there. Because how, as a team, you don't see what's happening in the last 7 years and try to change something, just a variable, see if something clicks. I guess they're doing that this year with Brewer, but as we talked in a past episode, neither one of us is really a believer in Berube that's gonna turn around the whole franchise all of a sudden. This is the most talent he's had under him. So, but he also had a goaltender in Bennington that had a ton of saves above expected. He was actually top 5 last year, which is
And they went on a
unbelievable.
hot run, and he had a bunch of leaders. We talked about it. He had a bunch
Yeah,
of leaders and,
bunch of
killers on his
top
team, and
dogs.
played
Yeah,
tough defense. They won 2-1. Like, you know, yeah, they overachieved and they did a lot of stuff, which speaks to in some ways to his leadership. But yeah, a lot of things have to go right, and he did have Petrangelo and O'Reilly on that team, and a few other guys. So anyway, just kind of want to, again, not the same situation. He does have the talent, so the question is going to be: is there going to be friction? Can he motivate them? Can he get them to play the right way? And is it going to make a difference long term for the team? Because at the end of the day, you also have to trust a lot of your team to be out there to play defense, to play the right way. And can you get through several rounds with what you have? I just think they lack depth up front, and I think that their defense is pretty old. So that's going to be, we'll have to see what happens with the Leafs. But the roster is definitely not to me, outside of the top guys, not an elite roster.
yeah. I was just reading that. I guess Saravalli mentioned to an Oilers journalist that in terms of the money, the Oilers and Draisaitl are further apart than what was initially thought. So just a curious thing that's popping up now that, it was mentioned that Draisaitl said that he's not going to negotiate his contract once the season starts. So essentially, they're looking to get it done now, but the whole 13.5 that's been out there, maybe I'd be surprised if that's too low for him. That's weird, right? Maybe they need him to take less. I don't know.
Yeah, they already talked about that, supposedly some of the core players about trying to take less. Who knows, man? All this stuff is funny to me. Canada and the hockey market and all that is funny. And some of these guys, they talk a big game about taking discounts, but obviously they also want their money, and they perform at a high rate. They have the biggest pressure. Everything's on them, win or lose. So they also want their money, and then the GM has to figure it out. So we'll see what it is. I think 13.5 is a smart contract, but it's a ton of money. He's made a ton of money, but
yeah, especially for 8 years. But he's a little older, right? He's 28, 29.
Yeah, no, but he's going to give you a lot of years still. It's just a question of winning versus, like, those are really high numbers. And again, these guys perform at a high level, and they're playing together. That's the other part, being together. Because I don't think Draisaitl will turn out the same numbers not being nearby Nearman David, but he's an elite player. So anyway, I'll see what the number is over there, but I don't know if it'll be under 14. We'll see what comes out.
Yeah. All right. We'll keep an eye on that. And then let's talk about the Devils, the Jersey Devils. They sort of went through a lot of injuries last season. Jack Hughes, etc. They needed a goaltender. And I was before I started looking into the numbers and all, I wanted to just kind of see their record in the past few years and how they've sort of progressed as a team since the Hughes brothers came in, and Jack Hughes had really good numbers as a rookie, etc. at a very young age. But if you go back to the 2020, let's say 2019-20 season, right around COVID, right? They were bottom of the Metro Division, 68 points. Then they were even worse in that COVID year. I think it was a shortened season, 50-something games. They were 7th in the Metro, 45 points. Then they were 63 points in 2021-2022, back to normal. And then they had the big year, right? 112 points. They were second to Carolina. They almost won the Metro. That's where everybody kind of thought they were going to take off and do the thing, especially when you have star power like Hughes, like the Hughes brothers. And then last year, 81 points. So I say that to say, because I want to start here just as the overall team. I don't really understand the hype. It seems like it's a lot, and a lot of it is coming from analysts and people that know about this stuff more than you and I. So that part is kind of strange to me. but they're somewhere between those 80 points and 110 points. They're not, maybe not as bad as 80 points during the season, but they're also not an 110 point team. So I kind of want to start there because we we see this a lot with teams like them, the Sabres. Now Montreal is sort of stepping into that same light where people are going to start looking at them like, hey, maybe in 3 to 4 years they're going to be contending. But I think that the point that people are missing is to contend for the cup. It's not as simple as just following the trajectory of these guys and hoping that they develop and eventually you have a playoff team. And once you get in the playoffs, anybody has a chance because wildcard teams can get to the finals. It's not that simple. There's a reason why those like specific wildcard teams got to the finals. And if you look at the overall team progress, looking at the Panthers, you look at Vegas, who started with a bit of an advantage. You look at Tampa. Yeah, you build the team, but you're building it in a very specific way that I think teams like New Jersey, Detroit, Montreal even are not necessarily doing that or have done that yet to have what it takes to actually win a cup and grind it out in the playoffs. So it's just curious to me. I don't understand. Maybe it's just the star power. I think it's just the Hughes brothers and the everything that comes with that. But I don't know what your take is on the team. But yeah.
Yeah. So to me, this is kind of, let's start with the hype. I think the hype comes from the flashiness, right? Is the Hughes brothers on the team, is Heischer, is Jasper Bratt, is, they're an offense kind of first team that looks fast and young and energetic, that drafted a bunch of guys. So there's a bunch of recognizable names on that team, right? And they have Timo Meyer and they have Tatar now that they brought back, and they have, Simon Nemec, which people are high on or whatever. So like, I think that part of it is the idea that, they just needed goaltending last year. They just needed, which is obviously in hockey not true. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Goaltending was an issue. Defense was also an issue. And I know that Dougie Hamilton was injured. Dougie Hamilton is not a good defensive defenseman, right? The numbers will show you that. He's a really good offensive guy. He's also been on a lot of different teams for a reason. And when you really parse it out, are the Devils a playoff team? The answer is likely yes, based on the roster, right? They have enough depth because the one thing that they were smart about was signing all these young guys at a young age and giving them the long-term contracts. Which
Hughes has a really
like 8 million or whatever. Like, it looks pretty good now. So that was smart. I think that that's the one thing the Devils have done, and that's why they're able to have a deep team even though they're still young. But to some of what you mentioned in terms of the numbers, the year that they won, they were a pretty good defensive team in terms of goals against, in terms of the goaltending was pretty decent. Akira Schmidt, kind of came out of nowhere for like 20 games and put up big numbers. And Vanacek had a really strong year for them. People forget that, right? So that was one piece of it. But the other thing is they had Kevin Ball, they had Marino, they had Ryan Graves, who had a career year. These guys were playing defense, physical, and could help with that, combining that with the goaltending, and then some guys having a career years offensively. Hughes had the biggest season of his life with 99 points and over 40 goals. Dougie Hamilton had a huge career year. People forget. Dougie Hamilton did the Monter thing. His career high was like in the 40s, I think maybe 50 points. And all of a sudden he has like 22 goals and 74 points, right?
Yeah.
And he has a huge year. But that's an outlier. I'm not saying he can't do that, but I'm saying that's an outlier. He's not a young guy anymore. So, career from Hughes, career year from him, you have all of that happening. You have three of your defensemen who are now gone, who are more sort of defense first kind of guys. And then now when you look at the roster, man, things that you have to keep in mind is, one, those things, right? Can all those guys have career years again? You're going to need some of that. Can your goaltending hold up? Markstrom is turning 35 this season. 3 out of the last 4 years, he's been under 905 save percentage, right? So, he's a great goalie at times. But he's also very inconsistent and can have bad years. Just a couple of years ago was in the 890s. But again, 3 of the last 4 years, 905 or under. So that's kind of where he's at in his career, generally speaking. And with a defense in front of him in New Jersey right now that's more offensive driven, is that going to impact his ability to hold the fort. And Jake Allen's numbers were not good. Even with the Devils last year was only 900. And before that, he's been in the 890s for like the last 3 years. And he's also an older guy. So your top two goalies right now are older dudes who, for the last 3 to 4 years, have been in the 890s or low 900s. So that's just a reality, right? Markstrom's good. I know some people overrate him. He is not, Hellbuck. So one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is like Dougie Hamilton is a turnover machine. Like just the turnover numbers are the giveaways are really, really high. He's an offense first kind of guy, even though he's a big dude. He doesn't hit a ton. I mean, he does hit, but for his size, he's not a bruiser. Then you have Luke Hughes, who's young and another turnover machine. Like the Hughes brothers, just to put it in context, they combined for 34 hits last year, both of them. They also combined for 140 turnovers, 140 giveaways. That's a lot, just for the Hughes brothers last year, right? And so, Jack Hughes is, face-off percentage is in the 30s his entire career, 35, 35, 36, 37, 35. He starts 70% of face-off on the offensive zone. Luke Hughes the same. These guys are defensive liabilities. You have a lot of guys on your team that are defensive liability. Brendan Dillon is the one bruiser they brought in. Who's a big hitter, big guy, but he's also a turnover machine. His giveaway numbers are pretty, really high for his entire career. And so now you have several guys, and Simon Nemec also takes a lot of risks. He's a young guy, kind of offensively skilled. So you have a lot of defensemen who are a little bit of offense first. Brett Pesci, they brought him in to do more of that defensive play. Brett Pesci doesn't hit. Look at the hit numbers for Pesci. He's not a physical guy. In Carolina, he was an assistant. He was paired with Shea. So that's the thing you also have to understand. Brett Pesci is a good player, but he's a $5 million player. He's not going to change your life. And he doesn't hit. So now you have a defense that's not incredibly physical outside of one guy. And that one guy, you have to control his minutes because he turns it over a lot. You have a first liner in Dougie Hamilton to turn it over, Luke Hughes turn it over. And so again, do they provide offense? Yes, they're going to put up points, they're going to score. Regular season, they're going to get points and they're going to be competing in the Metro and they're going to make the playoffs. They should be a playoff team based on the roster right now. My issue with them is how we have them as cup contenders, or even just like dismissing Carolina, dismissing the Rangers, just saying that they're going to win the Metro. It's a little bit disrespectful to these other teams. Carolina beat them in 5 pretty easily in the playoffs just 2 years ago when they had that big hot season. They got through the Rangers because the Rangers couldn't score. But Jack Hughes is -4 that series, even though he put up points. Like, most of the top guys were minus players in that series. People forget that. And so that's the thing, that why are we putting as top contenders a team that hasn't won more than a round? I mean, we laugh about the Leafs because they only won 1 round. And yet, for some reason, because we have names, you think they're magically going to win a cup or magically get to a finals? Can they get through Florida? Can they get through the Bruins? Can they get through Tampa? Can they get through the Rangers? Can they get through Carolina? They haven't done that. They haven't done any of that. But it's this flashy, like, there's something about it. Some teams where, like, they sell you on the name, they sell you on the flashiness, and just because it's deep, all of a sudden you think they can win in the playoffs. I'm not afraid of the Devils in the playoffs. I'll put it on record. Like, I don't think they're a good defensive team at all. I don't think they're a physical team. I think they can be had. I think you can forecheck them to death. I think their defensemen will give you the puck, and I don't buy that Markstrom will be the difference. And I think their offense, as flashy as it is, you hit them and you will injure them in the playoffs. They're small and they can get hurt. And so I just don't see it, man. Prove it to me at least. Get through a few rounds. Get through a few tough teams. Get through a physical series. Show me that you can actually win in the playoffs. But somehow they're cup contenders. So to me, it's like the hype doesn't come so much from the regular season, even though, putting them over the Rangers and Carolina, I think they're in the mix. I don't know that they're better. But to magically think that they're going to compete in the playoffs, or some people last year picked them to win the cup, they couldn't get through a second round in 5 games. And it's like they're projecting up. Oh, Jack Hughes. Like, guys like Jack Hughes as the main player, main leader, don't win cups. And so I'm gonna sort of make my last point, throw it back to you. The point I wanted to make, man, look at all the cup winners of the last 15 years. The only flashy, truly flashy player that was top of their team, or one of the top of their teams that you could say was Kane. And Taves was the captain, and Duncan Keith was the leader of the team. And then you had the flashy guy on the wing who could score in the playoffs. Crosby wasn't flashy. He's an elite 2-way player, physical player, smart player. Malkin was a beast, physical. Ovechkin, even Kucherov, and Stamkos, they're like killers, they're not just like the flashy guy who like weaves through everybody. They're like out there doing their stuff, fighting and doing that stuff. Look at the Panthers. Look at the Blues. The Bruins that made a final. Look at the Vegas. What flashy player does Vegas have?
It's a bunch of dogs, man.
Marchessault, Eichel. They're elite. There's a difference between a great player and a guy like Jack Hughes, a guy like Bedard, you know what I'm saying? These guys, when they're like the center, like Luke Hughes, like Makar and McKinnon and Rantanen and all these guys, like
They're
again they have the
feisty,
one
man.
cup, but they're feisty, they're
McKinnon
big.
is a dog, yeah.
Yeah, and McCart is it's a strong guy, and McKinnon is really physical. Rantanen is a really big guy. So and they had Kadri doing dirty stuff in that series, in that doing that run. So I think that people forget that you need a lot of that stuff to actually win in the playoffs, and that Carolina, as much as they may have lost some people, their structure, their leadership, their two-way play can make up for a lot. The Bruins defensive system is incredibly hard to beat in the playoffs. I don't care who you are. And the Panthers are the Panthers, and Tampa is not going to make it easy for you. So I just prove it to me at least, man. I just don't get why all of a sudden everybody has them as cup contenders when the numbers show that like that 1 year could have been a bit of a flash in the pan, and a lot of things had to go right. Can they recapture that magic, and can they actually win in the playoffs? Again, show it to me before I can tell you, because right now what I can tell you is that the numbers to me show that they're incredibly vulnerable on defense, and that they lost some key guys that they needed on defense to compete. And even with that, they went out in 5. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, yeah, it's just a weird hype machine. When, to your point, and I think it's a great point, that you don't win a cup with a leader like Jack Hughes, meaning your best player, and your comparison to the Blackhawks is actually the most accurate. But then you look at the rest of the team, and can those guys really carry Hughes in the playoffs a little bit, as they will need to, even though he's, I think he's like a point per game in the playoffs, even though the sample size is very small. And to me, that's the point. Maybe in 3 to 4 years, Jack Hughes becomes a different player or develops a
he
defensive
was
part.
also he was also -4. Again, he was on the ice for a lot of goals against too.
Yeah. And that's the issue with those guys. That's why, like, you have a guy like that in your second line. Maybe that's great. Or maybe he's a winger and you have two really solid centers that he can play with. And that's a different story. And I think that that's kind of like the moral of all of this. When you look at the centers and the top guys and all these cup contending teams, realistic cup contenders, they're just tough guys. They're either two-way players, or they're great leaders, or they're not these cookie getting players. Even Austin Matthews, that's like my biggest issue with him, is that he's just a point getter. Or a goal scorer, I should say, because McDavid elects to pass a lot and he gets his points that way. And that actually builds confidence in those other guys to help you then win when the playoffs come. And then if you need to step up, like McDavid had to, and he did, to me, that's what you're looking for in that guy. Someone that has situational awareness, knows when to take a step back, when to defend, when to keep things in order when they're on the ice. And you saw that breakdown about Barkov, from that hockey psychology website or site account, that sort of broke that down, how cheating and trying to, get your points and do certain things will cost you on defense. And sometimes that's the difference in a game. Sometimes that's how you lose a playoff game. You lose 1-0, 2-1. So yeah, I don't get the hype at all. I kind of, 2 years ago when they did really well, I kind of just ignored the whole conversation around that, sort of half paying attention. But now that I see this hype again, it's just weird. It's weird that, I guess, to your point, certain specific teams get that when they have a flashy player. We've seen it with the Leafs and with some other teams around the league that they're not good enough. And I guess that's why, like, the Carolinas and the Panthers and stuff don't get that attention, because of that star power. But yeah, it's a curious pick.
It is a lot of that idea of the American thing, and just Jack Hughes and their obsession with the family and their obsession with the players and the skill. And again, it's fun. I'm not trying to say it isn't. And I think the Devils, they eventually can build the right balanced roster to try to win. And again, they may prove us wrong. I want to see it. That's the thing to me. Why overhype a team until they've actually proven it, until we've actually seen it? And to be honest, they did this with the Leafs early on. There were comparisons to the Blackhawks when they put all the young guys together and they made the playoffs almost right away, right? Many years ago, because people forget they were making the playoffs earlier than people were expected. And the first couple of runs that were like, or at least couple of playoffs that people were comparing them to the Blackhawks, which of course the Blackhawks took offense to, but that was the hype, right? So I think some of that was done with the Leafs, and now slowly but surely by 2021 when Montreal was like, oh no, this isn't working, and then by now it's become a bit of a joke. I'm not saying that will happen to the Devils, but that could happen if you don't balance out the team correctly. And if you overhype it to a place where like you have to see it in the playoffs, and it's not easy to win, and it's not easy to win with flashy offense. That if that is your bread and butter, that is going to be much harder to pull off than if you have incredibly great goaltending and defense and physicality and depth and balance. Which again, I think they have a good team, but like Timo Meier doesn't play defense. Tomas Tatar, is he going to play a lot of defense? And Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt and all these guys. And then again, Luke Hughes and Nemec, they're not physical players. Brett Pesci doesn't hit. I just don't know, man. And can you stay healthy? I mean, that's the other thing. Last year, a bunch of injuries.
Yeah.
Dougie Hamilton has a history of injuries lately, or last 5 years too. So
yeah, that's another question mark, right? Timo Meier. What are you gonna get out of him? But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. One couple of minor things. Well, really just one. And as far as Nick Robertson goes with the Leafs, Chris Johnston says that he still hasn't changed his mind. He wants to be traded as soon as they can, and he's not going to extend with them regardless, even if they sit him this year. I think they still have him for the season. Even if they make him play or whatever, I'm sure he'll be out there. But looking at the Maple Leafs left wingers, there's a crisis there. They're really in trouble if Bobby McMahon is your second line left winger.
Yeah, you have to bank on him continuing on the track from last year, and there's no proof that might happen. They just need to trade him for a pick and sign Cousins, sign whoever, man. At this point,
Pacioretty, I think it's still
Pacioretty. Add a body in there for now, and then try to accumulate cap, and by the deadline, try to make a move and prioritize either a third line center or a left winger. But for now, I do think that it's better for them. Anyway, Nick Robertson is not great defensively anyway, so and they have offense. So why not bring in a vet, somebody who can play two ways, brings a little bit of physicality to the team. You can move up and down, maybe try Easton Cowan on the third line, whatever you got to do. But like, why this Robertson drama is unnecessary? Just trade him for a pick. You're not going to regret it. I just don't see. I mean, can he become a 20-goal scorer in the league? Sure. He's going to be a liability. He's probably going to play for a bad team. Send them to a bad team for like a third-round pick. Who cares?
Yeah, there's word is that the one trade they'll look to explore for sure is to get Vatrano for Robertson and a pick, maybe. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Vatrano's a third line guy, but he can give you some scoring, and I guess he's a little feisty. But yeah, they're kind of stuck.
Yeah, maybe that's a trade to do, a high pick and Robertson for Vatrano, but I don't know if they'll do that. I just don't, it's the cap thing too. They have to calculate. So,
oh yeah, for sure. All right, we'll wrap it up there. If you have nothing else, Daryl, guys, make sure to subscribe if you like the content. We will be putting out episodes weekly, at least one, if not two. We still haven't made our picks for the year, which is coming up pretty soon. Division winners, all those good predictions that I got correct last season. And I think we should probably do like a bet this year. We should definitely do a wager when we do our picks, see how many of us get it right, and whoever wins, maybe we have to wear, an embarrassing jersey or something like that. Maybe
we're getting there. We should do something starting next week with some of the predictions for the team, for the Panthers, for the league, for everybody.
Yeah. Until then, we'll keep providing updates on Draisaitl. if anything comes up with Tavares or Marner before the season starts as well, and any other drama that might pop up. But until then, we'll catch you all next week. Peace.